Dork back again. Today I'm filming Dorkcast episode 28, and it's all about data literacy, baby. And the date, as you can see, is the 14th and the 15th. No, 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 don't fear. I'm not going to be talking to my guests for 24 straight hours. It's not that going to be that kind of episode. It just happens to be Valentine for the Click Dork here in my Data Cathedral studios, but my guest is actually in Australia. And Jane Crofts is who I'm going to be talking to today. And the title that I've chosen to give her is the creator of Databilities. And notice I've put some little soft little hearts in there, Jane, because I'm still celebrating Valentine's Day. And I know you're not, but I thought that might be kind of a cute thing to do. I know that all of you as guests are multitasking. And so feel free to go out to LinkedIn, connect with Jane right now, go out to her website, send her an email, well, however you want to connect, but you've got that information. Or if you are one of those that, man, you really are focused because you really want to know about data literacy, feel free to screenshot this, save it, so that you can reach out afterwards when you say, wow, I definitely have to reach out and contact Jane. I met Jane several years ago because she was one of the founders of the DataLiteracyProject.org site that Click sponsored. Huge proponent. There was a lot at the time when we met several years ago, data literacy this, data literacy that, and it was kind of in a hype cycle, like generative AI might be today. And like, what is it? What is data literacy? Well, Jane was one of the people that not only actually knew, but she created something called the Databilities that I loved. Because if you know anything about me, have seen any of my other Doorcasts, it's always about, yeah, that's nice, but what are we going to do to fix it? It's always about action. And as I talk to Jane, she's smiling already because she can't wait to tell you what Databilities are. Um, she also has her website is datatothepeople.org that I love the connotations of that, right? It's data is not for just the click dorks of the world so that everybody can kiss my ring, make a phone call to me and tell me, and I'll give them the right answer, right? I went through those kind of years, Jane, I'm not going to lie to you. I was the guy that people reached out to for years to give answers. And so I've given a lot of answers. It's fun, but it also becomes a strain because they would have the nerve to say it's month end on Monday and I need answers and it's 5 o'clock on Friday. And I would have to give them those answers. So when we got to the point of decentralizing data and actually putting it in other people's fingertips that weren't necessarily data dorks like me, I loved it because it actually freed me up. Now, I want to start with a just a softball question. Like, I'm just going to put this right on the tee for you to knock out of the park, because a lot of people often misconstrue data literacy and they think you're either born data literate or you're not, or you are data literate or you're not. And there's just a switch you flip and suddenly you're one or the other. Is that right?
No, far, far, far from the truth, Dalton. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to join you on this Dorkcast. Um, when you were born, do you remember how long it took you to be able to read a newspaper?
Few years.
Few years. Okay, so by the time you were three, you were reading a newspaper. How about, and this is going to show both of our age, how about the old encyclopedias? How old were you when you were able to, read an encyclopedia?
Probably 6 or 7, and that's a
Oh my
great
goodness,
because I
you're
actually
a very
loved them.
advanced child.
We had a set, and not that I could read everything,
Yeah,
but I was fascinated that I could. They were pretty, like they were hardbound in those days, right? There's something about holding a hardbound leather
yeah,
encyclopedia, and I could literally flip and find anything. So
yeah,
I was fascinated with things like dolphins, and I could go find it. I
yeah.
couldn't read every word in it, but it
No,
fascinated
but
me.
and you saw the
All that
pictures.
information sitting up on a shelf, and it looked so beautiful.
Mm. Well, I feel like data literacy is very much the same as our sort of general literacy, that it is our ability to read, write, and comprehend data. And the point that I make about, when you were born, could you do these things? No one is born literate. I'm yet to see a single case study across the world where a newborn baby is picking up the newspaper, able to read, comprehend, and
Yep.
then have a conversation about it. It just doesn't happen. So why then would we have an expectation that an individual either is or is not data literate? We should be accepting that literacy is something that develops over time. Literacy then turns into fluency, then turns into mastery. You may have been reading about or looking at pictures of dolphins when you were 6 or 7. If you have taken that interest to the next level and studied biomarine science and become a professor in, I'm sure there's a more appropriate term, but a professor in dolphins at your leading university, then I would say that you've become not only fluent and you're literate in data around dolphins, but you've moved into mastery.
Yep.
Now, we're not all going to need to be able to host lectures on the life cycle of dolphins, but we do need to be able to ask those questions, and we need to know that the encyclopedia is where we can go to look at this particular topic, but to also look at other topics.
Yep.
So for me, data literacy is very much a continuum, and we're all at different points. We're all at different points on that journey, and we all have very different paths on that journey. We don't need to be an exact carbon copy of each other when it comes literacy competencies. And in fact, data literacy is such a broad spectrum of skills and competencies that we can't possibly all be experts in every single one.
Nice, nice. Very good. I liked the way you phrased read, comprehend, and have a conversation about. How do you, are those the words you describe as literacy, or how would you define data literacy?
Yeah, I do use the words read, write, and comprehend,
Okay.
because certainly in Australia, and I'm sure it's very common in other countries, when we're talking about children at school, we talk to this concept of being able to teach them to read, write, and comprehend, and that's how literacy is defined down here. And it's not too foreign, I imagine, to the way that literacy is defined around the world. And certainly when we look to sort of global assessments of literacy rates across children and adults, they are looking at those elements. They are looking at reading, they are looking at writing, and also comprehension. It is
Hmm.
not just one element of can someone find a book. It's about what do we then do with that book.
Nice, nice. And I like the word comprehend because I've seen other definitions like argue with type thing, but I like comprehend because it has a connotation to me that I would be able to infer the impact of something and what that would mean. And if I can infer an impact of it, I could probably plan an action to counter it
Yeah,
or keep doing it.
yep, yep. And comprehend doesn't always need to mean knowing the answer, but it means being able to recognize that perhaps you don't have the
Mhm.
answer, and to then you continue that conversation and to continue that exploration
Yep.
with others, or seek others' advice on that particular problem. I agree. There are so many definitions of data literacy out
Yeah.
there, which is why I really wanted to keep it simple, and
Mhm.
keep it consistent with something that we all follow as part of our childhood journey. And now let's, as young people, old people, working, not working, women, men, anyone. Let's all continue on that path of data literacy in that sort of shared and familiar context
Mhm.
of literacy.
Nice. Now here's the million-dollar question. If somebody were in a country like Sweden and they knew that culturally there was a different word, would you fine them for using read, write, and something else other than comprehend? Or would it be appropriate for people in Sweden to try to give it the definition that fits that culture and what they know and what they're already teaching in universities?
Yeah, I think that context is incredibly important. And so when we talk to organizations about how they can actually address some of these concerns, it is about contextualizing and using the local nuance, using the examples that are relevant and make sense. I'm not a an NFL person, but as I'm sure you know, the Super Bowl was just a couple of days ago,
That's
and
right.
yeah, and I was watching some coverage down here, and they were talking about we need to be aware of cultural differences.
Mhm.
For example, an Australian might say to an American, "Let's have a brew." And does that mean let's have a beer, or does that mean let's have a coffee? Even within Australia, if you said to someone, let's have a brew, that would mean very different outcomes
Nice.
to different groups. So yes, I think it's incredibly important. And no, no one's going to get fined for using a different word to
Cool.
comprehend. I think we all have our definitions,
Mhm.
but it's really, if we can keep the spirit of data literacy being that all-encompassing and not just the analytics and not just the visualization, but really about that finding data, understanding whether or not data is trustworthy, understanding the source of it, understanding where you can get data to augment that. So
Mhm.
all about accessing data, and then how do we collect data? How do we make sure that the data that we are collecting is going through various quality checks? How can we measure quality of data? And as part of that collection, how can we protect that data? Then
Yep.
we start to move into the analytics and the decision making, the storytelling. So we can't forget those early pieces. Otherwise, what are we working with? Mess.
So, and that brings up a point because on my last Doorcast, I spoke with Susan Walsh about data quality, and the fact is, we both want to blame you for the data quality problem because there's
Yeah.
obviously a causation. When people came to me looking for answers, I knew which part of our data was horrible. I knew how to counter it, and I knew what answers to give to people. When we start making data available to people and they see their own data, because of data literacy, they start seeing the data quality problem. I think that's causation.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There has never been a stronger a stronger causation.
Oh, that might be a correlation, not a causation. Probably
Uh,
part of data literacy to begin with, right? But no,
but
on
I
the
think,
serious side, it is the more people that can get into the data, they start seeing those data quality problems that in the past they just didn't care about.
yep.
'Cause I would often, somebody would say, I need the number. The number's garbage. Like half the rows in the file from our partner were missing. Well, just give me the number anyway. Like, but the number's garbage. Well, just give me what we got. but the number is garbage. It's a meaningless number. Okay, 17, the number 17. And so when people would ask me things, I would literally just start always just the answer was always 17.
Mm.
Well, prove it to me. Oh, prove it to me it's not. Prove to me it's not. How are you going to prove to me it's not? Right? The data is garbage. You don't have, I know that you don't have the data to show me what you think the right answer should be. And the more that data literacy has caught on, thanks to efforts from you and Valerie Logan and Jordan Morrow and Ben and others, right? More people start seeing it and then they start complaining. So
Mhm.
while you say we have this underlying pin of governance and the data is perfect before we do anything, that's not really the case, right? It's I want
No.
the numbers today. You could clean it up, next week when you're free, right? When things slow down, you clean
Things
it up.
always slow down for the data people. We only work one day a month.
Yeah,
It's the day
yeah,
before month end. The
yeah.
rest of the time, there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
No, I agree, and I think that that's wonderful. Think that it's wonderful that people are starting to see that the quality is rubbish. I think that it's wonderful that people can recognize that the data is rubbish because awareness is the first step to addressing the problem. We need people to not just hear from the data team, but to actually see what the problem is. And that's how we can go about making change, which is not going to happen overnight.
Hmm.
But we can go about helping that front line that is often responsible for a lot of data collection,
Hmm.
helping them understand the importance of the quality of the data that they're collecting, and helping our product teams understand the importance of having rules behind different fields so that we are capturing data in a structured format.
Hmm.
It's all about exposing those little pieces along the pipeline that when we're working through them all, and we do have to work through them all, that's where we're going to see the uplift that the millions of dollars that have been invested in BI and governance and data catalogs. That's when all of that is going to really shine when we've
Yep.
taken care of the plumbing underneath.
Yep. Yeah. And the rest of the stuff isn't very sexy, right? That nobody wants to spend money on all of those things because it's just not sexy. It's something they don't see. Even just 5 years ago, it was something they weren't seeing the results of because they
Yep.
would just go to a person, give me the number, tell me what we should do, and they didn't care, right?
No.
If the data was garbage and the pipeline wasn't there, they just didn't care.
Yep.
Now they do, which is a great thing. So I will change my subject and say data literacy didn't cause the quality problem. Data literacy is the reason that we are now cleaning up a data quality problem.
Thank you. That's much kinder. Yes.
Instead of blaming you and wagging my finger, I'm hugging you, right? You mentioned something great. You said as you become literate, that turns into fluency, and then that turns into mastery. And that was kind of what I loved about Databilities that you clearly set forth. And I'll give you a chance to talk more about Databilities in a second, but it really resonated with me because customers were asking me, what can I do? And it was like, well, not only is it because the talking of the time years ago was you're data literate, you need to become, you're not data literate, you need to become data literate, right? It was binary. And it was like, look, you could probably very well read and write and comprehend pie charts and bar charts. Um, but is that a fluency that you can also look at other charts? Can you, for mastery, can you then would you be able to read the data and get up in front of a room and make a presentation about it that you felt you weren't going to get challenged on, right? That was going to be respectful. So give everybody else a little bit more background on data abilities.
Open question. Fabulous.
Yep.
So when we started, or when I started this work, I was actually writing something last night, and just updating bits and pieces. I started this in 2017. That feels like a very long time ago. But when I started this in 2017, the term data literacy was really just starting to buzz around. And we had the likes of Gartner and certainly Valerie Logan on stage talking about the need for data literacy. And so there was this hype. Got to do something. We've got to be data literate. But no one knew what it meant. No one had an agreed definition of what data literacy meant. And so, I'd been working in business intelligence field for many, many years before that, and had always felt a disconnect between the business and the data people, that there was something missing in their ability to communicate, to get the right outcome or to get an outcome other than 17. But there were some people who could ride that intersect and they could do it reasonably well. And so what was it about them that gave them the ability to talk across languages, if you will? And so that's where my lens of data literacy came from. And there were emerging definitions, but really no one could nail it. I also spent a lot of time in the public service in Australia. And I'm sure the same can be said in the States, but public servants, we love a framework because it not only helps you understand exactly what you have to do in your job to be you're seen as performing well, but it also is incredibly clear. If you want the next job or you want a job over there, well, this is exactly what you have to do to be able to demonstrate you can meet the requirements of that job. So I wanted to take this very broad concept that no one could define and marry that with my love of a competency framework.
Nice.
But I didn't know what the beginning point was. I didn't know what the competencies were. Thankfully, I was not the only person struggling with this problem, and there had been a significant amount of research, a knowledge synthesis report produced by Dalhousie University in Canada. And this report outlined it was a knowledge review across the world, a few hundred pages. It was a great read, but it outlined what it found to be common competencies that had been defined by different people and different organisations around the world. So they set forward their competencies. I had a vision of this framework with progressions. I started with 15 competencies, feeling that that was really the right number. And of those 15 competencies, I then had 6 levels of progression. And we started at level 1, which was if somebody gives me very clear instructions and helps me do something, I can probably do it, through to I can sort of do it on my own, through to I have got this down pat. I can not only do this on my own, I can do it in a more complex environment or solve more complex problems, and I can teach someone else how to do it, like formally teach someone else how to do it, not just the person sitting next to me at the workstations. So these progressions started to build out for the competencies. That was published in 2018.
Yep.
And I launched the original Databilities Framework at the United Nations World Data Forum in Dubai in 2018. And at that time, this was really about saying, well, data literacy is actually as important as literacy and numeracy to society and to our ability to continue to participate in society and in the economy. So there was a lot of support for this idea of the framework to be able to articulate what does it actually look like for a person at a different point along that sort of progression. In 2020, after using the framework for a couple of years and working with different clients, getting feedback, etc., we expanded the framework. So we're now at 18 competencies because it was really important that we bring in competencies around data culture and data ethics, and to also be clearer on competencies around data governance and stewardship. So we're now at 18 and have been since 2020. And Databilities is, of course, the foundation of our global data literacy benchmark, which has had three releases now. The last happened just after Christmas last year. And that gives us an opportunity to look at a competency level of what data literacy looks like across regions, across industries, and occupations, to be able to see, where are we seeing stronger competencies in data decision making? Where are we seeing stronger competencies in data collection or data management? And so it's an interesting study and a study that we're seeing improvements over time, but certainly gives us a way to benchmark at an individual level, at an organizational level, and say, well, how are we stacking up compared to what's happening out there?
Nice. And that benchmark is something you recently published, and I know you shared it on LinkedIn, and I think you even have a link to it on your
Of
datathepeople.org.
course.
So people can go find that. Just give me one highlight. Like when you saw that, what one, maybe two things that really stood out, like, wow, I never would have guessed that this area would have gotten this much further or this much better, or like in ethics, why did this one segment really, this thing stood out?
Yeah. I'll start with the sad story. We found that 11% of respondents were able to help their peers with all competencies.
Okay.
So they were able to help their peers with their data concepts and culture, reading, writing, and comprehension. So that's just over 1 in 10 are floating around, being able to help everyone. Now, you spoke to earlier about that guy being the guy that people come to. I think a 1 in 10 is probably a better position than it may have been some time ago. But 1 in 10 being able to help the rest of us with all concepts relating to data, that's not going to help our organizations move forward. So that was certainly a startling figure for me. I think that if I look at competencies and what we're coming out on top as being areas of relative strength compared to areas of real opportunity. I think that it would be no surprise to you that data governance was the lowest ranked competency across the board. So that tells us that the awareness piece might be starting to filter out, but people are still not understanding what they personally need to do to contribute to the data governance within their organization. Who can they get help from? And this is where conversations with people like yourself are really helpful, because it's taking this shroud of mystery off this deep dark secret world of data. No one is hiding anything. It's all there. It has all been there forever. Thank you for looking at it finally, right?
Hmm.
So we're moving from this, we're hoarding data and we're hoarding the systems and processes. No, we're
Right.
not. We've always wanted you to play. But now people are wanting to get involved and
Yeah.
see how they fit within that sort of data ecosystem. Interestingly, the highest sort of competencies were around data-driven decision making and presenting data verbally. Now, that doesn't mean that every person responding was comfortable and confident in those competencies, but this is where we had the greatest number of what we termed as our confident and our coaches. I
Okay.
spoke about Databilities having 6 levels of progression. Six is a lot to have, sort of labels for and to be able to speak in conversation about. So we grouped the 6 levels of progression into 3 groups of people that we could have conversations about, and we called them the curious. So they are sort of our level 1, level 2, our confident, our level 3, level 4, and our coaches of level 5, level 6. And so when I talk about the highest level of competence within the Databilities Framework, we had, let's have a look here. We had, for presenting data verbally,
Yep.
there was sort of 42% of curious. So nearly half of the organization felt that if they were given really, really clear instructions and really clear templates and really clear guidance, like hold my hand as I do this,
Hmm.
yes, they could get through that process, compared to 20%, only 20%, saying that they needed that hand holding and that, really detailed and intense support when it comes to data discovery. So knowing where to go to get
Hmm.
data. So we're starting to see the impact of awareness programs of data democratization in terms of people knowing where to get things, in terms of people knowing roughly the systems and processes to abide by. And what we want to see is that progression from curious to confident,
Hmm.
confident to coach. And so that's what we look at over time to see where that movement has been. And there have been a couple of instances where we've gone backwards, but again, I think that is also an interesting and wonderful thing, because it's recognizing that as we become more aware of the entire data ecosystem that we're participating in,
Yep.
we're becoming more aware that we don't know it all. And so we're perhaps feeling less confident than we were when we thought we knew that the number was going to come straight out of Dalton's mouth at the end of the month. So competencies change over time. The sort of stress or the focus of different competencies changes over time. Storytelling was a big hype for a while, and I think we've moved past storytelling into evidence-based or fact-based decisions or questioning. And I think that as we see these shifts around, the importance of particular competencies will sort of ebb and flow. But if we've got an organization that's got coverage of all competencies with at least a confident population across all competencies, not within the same person, but spread across and shared by multiple people within the organization, then that organization is going to be the one that's going to be able to keep moving forward and keep taking the benefit from the dollars that have been invested in the systems and processes so far.
Nice. That's so much to unpack from there. So I've taken a lot of notes. You mentioned the word continuum. I love that word. I used to do a presentation called the data consumption continuum. And for those who aren't familiar with the term continuum, it involves minor little steps between point A to point B is a minor step, point C is a minor step. But by the time you look at point A to point E, it's a huge transformation. And I think that's a phenomenal term to be looking at in terms of data literacy. It's not binary. It is a continuum. There are people that are curious. There's a few steps to take to get to a comfort. There's a few more steps to take to get to confident. A lot more steps to take to get to coach. But that's how organizations are going to make a digital transformation.
Absolutely.
Right there's a complete skill there. You mentioned being able to make evidence-based decisions. I come from a healthcare background prior to working at Click, and it was all about access to data.
Yep.
And evidence-based care is becoming, for several years has become a hot thing. Prior to that, prior to electronic health records, it was all hearsay and gut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Fred was talking to Dr. Sally and arguing. Well, I think ours is this. Well, I think this. The 4 sample size that I'm referring to and the 6 sample size that I'm referring to, right? But once we had electronic health records and we can start bringing the data together, things started changing, and we started. I've worked with several of organizations that were customers through our Click Health organization, had clinical care pathways that they were starting to realize, hey, this is the path that we should take.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only could they consume outcomes, it was consuming time. We could track the
Yep.
time, and we could
Yep.
track costs and other impacts, right?
Yep.
And so the things that were gut decisions or things that everybody just knew because, Fred said it at the water cooler and Fred's the chief medical officer, those things started getting proven false and we started improving things. And I'd imagine that's the same way in other organizations, whatever the types of
Absolutely.
fields, it's you you think you're doing the right thing until you got the data to prove it. You don't know, or you don't know that there's a slightly better way. You could have
Absolutely.
phenomenal outcomes, but you could speed up the time to those outcomes.
Absolutely. And do you have the right resources assigned at the right time? Are we going off the everybody knows theory that on a full moon, the emergency department will be full?
Mhm.
Or are we actually looking at what's happening? And is it that, the last full moon happened to coincide with, a major event that had, thousands of people on the street. So therefore, yes, the emergency department was full that night.
Yep.
But if you look at every other full moon over the last 6 years, then you're
Yep.
not seeing that same trend. So it's
Exactly.
giving us the ability to look at all parts of the business, not just the outcomes, not just patient outcomes, not just shareholder values. It's giving us the opportunity to look at all parts of our processes. Are we as efficient as we could be? Do we have the right resources in the right place at the right time? Are we using all of the systems that we've spent this money on? Are we actually having customers pick up and use our product more than twice? What sort of interaction are we having with our top customers as compared to customers who've only spent $2 with us in the last 6 years? Are we really maximizing the efficiency and the effectiveness of whatever our organization does? And I think that as people are starting to see, look, we can measure not only outcomes of product or service or cost, but we can use this data that is being collected every millisecond of every day across a million different forums and faculties. How can we get something out of this data that is going to help us transform the way we're doing business, whatever
Right.
that business is?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. The other thing that you brought up was people looking for more data. And it really it just dawned on me. We have a number of partners. I work in our partner organization, and in the past year, we've had a couple of partners who are being asked by customers to put together more of a data hub,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that they could see data that comes from here and data from another organization and data from a different department and different data. And it's dawning on me now that that's because they're ready to consume more. Like it took them time to get maybe to a confidence level in their own department's data. And now they're being asked to have insights about their department and
Mm-hmm.
another. And
Mm-hmm.
then I need to know the real story between us and them. Right. And so it really it brightens my heart now. And the next time I have a conversation with one of these partners, be like, man, you know how you fit into data literacy? Right. It's that need. And the best part of my job, I build some analytics and those things are shared within our company. But different things are shared and need security.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I love the most is getting emails. Hey, I need to be added because I want to be able to get to this data. Right. And I've got a meeting tomorrow with someone who's like, I don't just want to use the data. I want to change the screen and add a few things.
Yeah.
Right. And those things just absolutely, let me drop what I'm doing now because it's boring and nonsense. I'm going to help you move further on that continuum. So let's say that I'm some person in some position at some company that's like, man, we're really struggling. We're still behind the eight ball. I want to take a look at what this data abilities are. Who is the type? Is there a specific type of a role of the people that generally reach out to you and say, hey, we'd really like to get you involved, Jane?
It's the most successful discussions happen when there is a cross section of people within the organization. So often the pinch points will be being felt by the data people, and the business will be blaming the data people, and the data people will be blaming the business.
Yep.
And and it's not a blame game. It is a learning opportunity. And so if we're talking about a learning opportunity, who should be involved? Our learning people, our learning and development, our human resources. They really need to help the organization as a whole understand that this is part of our organizational culture. This is part of our
Interesting.
organizational language, and that we need to have a common footing across the organization so that when I say 17, people recognize that's the number that Dalton comes up with every month. And we're not
Yep.
segregating information within the organization, because segregation hasn't had many positive outcomes.
Right.
So why should it have positive outcomes when it comes to data? So we definitely need someone from learning and development or human resources involved. Ideally, the CEO. It's not going to happen, but we need that executive sponsorship,
Okay.
because without that executive sponsorship in terms of setting the mandate and setting the expectation that this is how our organization is going to operate. Certainly, we need some data people involved in the conversation, because we're going to be effectively pointing the organization to them in one way, shape, or form. And we need them to be aware, hang on, the tsunami's coming. We are about to open the floodgates. We're about to get everybody sending emails saying, I need access to this, I need access to that. And it's not going to be as scary as that onslaught, but what we are doing is very gradually lifting the floodgate,
Mhm.
so that we're starting to let that trickle through. So we do need a cross section or a cross functional working group to say, something's not right. We've spent millions of dollars on our systems. We haven't seen the change that was promised with this investment.
Right.
Why? Why has this not happened? And so the way that we like to approach that understanding of why is to say, well, okay, all right, let's just sit down and take a minute. Let's understand where the organization is now. And
Right.
so you can think of it as a maturity assessment, but it's not. It is taking a snapshot of the organization as it currently stands at an individual level. We ask people to complete this assessment, this survey. It's not a performance management thing. It's really about getting that landscape so that we know where we're starting from.
Right.
I am yet to find, during COVID, Melbourne was the most locked down place in the world. So we had a lot of time to find indoor activities to help us from going crazy. And so I have a pile of puzzles that I went through at that time. And so it's very difficult to put a puzzle together if you don't know what the final picture needs
Hmm.
to be. Effectively, our measurement is saying, well, here are all of the pieces of the puzzle, here are all of the individuals, and this is what they currently look like. But we need to then be able to say, and what is the picture we're driving towards? What is the picture that is a reasonable expectation for an organization like ours? And that's where the benchmark studies can come in useful, because we're able to say, okay, for a financial services organization, this is really what the mix is looking like when it comes to the benchmark. For a clerical position, this is what the mix of competencies is looking like from the benchmark. For a management type role, this is what the mix of competencies looks like. And if we can get agreement on what that future state or what good looks like,
Right.
then we know what the puzzle is supposed to look like when we put it back together. And
Right.
so that helps us define, well, where do we then need to spend more time? Should we be spending more time in developing data visualization skills? No, we've done that. We've spent all of the time on understanding pie charts versus bar charts versus line charts. What we really need, where our biggest gap is showing up most of the time, is around data collection, data culture, data governance, and data management. And so how can we leverage the expertise of our data people to help the organization understand how we manage data at this particular organization? Or how can we work with our product team to say, listen, the data that's coming through the product is actually rubbish. We need to tighten up some of the variables that are coming through. So how can we look at where the pain points are across the organization and where we need to bolster competencies so that we start to see that that transformation that you mentioned, it's starting to actually gain traction,
Right.
because we're not here talking digital transformation. We're not here talking evidence-based decision making for the fun of it. It has the power to transform our organization. It has the power to transform our economies, our societies. But unless we get all of the pieces moving in sync along that chain, we're not going to see the results.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And that's, you kind of alluded to it. One of the things that I really had loved when I walked through the first time was that it wasn't the same questions or measurements or goals for every person. Like, nobody has to be a data dork. A
Yeah.
big cheese, there's questions and there'd be a target of what being confident might look like
Yeah.
versus the data scientist and what being confident might look like for them.
Absolutely.
So I love how you
Absolutely.
had broken that down. So somebody brings you in, you do the measurement, you wag your finger at them, you tell them that they're a C minus on the scale, and you walk away, right?
Yeah. No.
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 Um,
I'm not I'm not a believer in putting everyone in a 2-day workshop and lecturing at them for 2 days and then washing my hands and walking away. That's not how adults learn. That is indeed not how children learn, but it's certainly not how adults learn. Adults need to be experiencing the problem and the process. They need to be able to explore within sort of that sand pit environment.
Yep.
Adults need to be able to, you know, practice and see the results of the practice to help them learn. So this concept of learning by doing is very important in a data literacy concept. But how can we put guardrails, if you will, alongside so that people are practicing running in the right direction, and that we don't have people practicing running just in, you know, whichever direction they feel is appropriate. So we want to set up guardrails. So we talk about using different toolkits that, you know, often we work through leaders because really the best way to start to bring an awareness for a person to how they play in the data ecosystem and what they can do to personally improve and also get more out of the data ecosystem is have a one-on-one conversation with them. Now, that's fine in an organization of 2 or 3 people, but when we're talking 2 or 3,000 or 2 or 300,000, it becomes very, very tricky. So if we work through people leaders, local level management, helping them foster a conversation with their people on particular topics. And these are not conversations where we're asking every people leader to be an expert suddenly in you know, principles of data quality, but it's about asking that people leader to say, let's talk about the data that we used last week. Now, if the first response to that question is we didn't use any data, that's another problem that we need to sort of overcome. And so that's sort of feeding that back and giving the leader the sort of prompts to be able to say, well, maybe we did use data, but maybe it doesn't fit what we think of data. But having conversations about, well, how did we use data last week? Well, you know, I entered 2 transactions and you know, I had trouble with the third, so I just put it on a piece of paper and put it in Joe's inbox. Okay. So what about that third customer? Joe, did you get it? No, I haven't seen. And so to really bring that conversation to a local level, equipping the leader with the ability to prompt and ask questions to help guide people as they learn to practice this sort of thinking and these skills. That's one really powerful way to bring the individual to data literacy. And I think that the more that we can provide those safe, structured and planned sort of interactions and discussions around data, that's how we're going to bring more people to the conversation. Of course, there's always going to be a need for you know, more detailed learning and richer learning, whether that's through e-learning or whether that is through work-based projects. A lot of people do sort of hackathons where they might be tackling particular things. And you know, learning is not a once-off. Learning is every day. You've learnt things in this conversation. I've learnt things in this conversation. But what we've done is we've had a structure around it that we're going to have this 2-way, I'll ask questions, you ask questions, and then let's see how we can explore. And so we just need to set those environments, and that's where that executive leadership and executive sponsorship becomes so critical. Because if we've got an organisation where it doesn't matter what the data says, my way or the highway, this is my opinion, so that's where we're going, doesn't matter what the data says, then we're not creating an environment where people can practice and know that when they've built these skills of being able to have meaningful conversations around the use of data and the outcomes that we can achieve with it, sort of what's the point in an organization like that? So we need the executive on board and supportive of a data-driven environment as opposed to the highest paid person's opinion.
Nice. Yeah, and I was never the highest paid person either. It was my opinion that mattered. Um, so great stuff. That's essentially you're not, it's not like buy Databilities today for 19.95, and if you call in the next 30 minutes, I'll send you a second copy that you could print out for free, right? And you're not saying, hey, I'm going to come in for 2 days or a week and teach a course. You partner with organizations to help them through, you use the word tricky, like all
Yeah.
this stuff is tricky. There's a lot of moving pieces, and you've got the experience to help them. So you bring them in and partner. I wanted to end with something a little bit crazy because we kind of got to data literacy because of reporting, because of analytics, because of BI, because of decentralizing access. Um, and people were realizing, hey, I want access. I don't want to have to wait for the answer. And now that model is kind of changing with generative AI, right? There is no visual. It's not about reading a scatter plot. It's about you're going to ask a question, you get an answer, and I'm imagining that I've got this trusty super duper bot that I talk to, and I probably don't need to be data literate anymore when I ask questions of the super duper bot, right? Yeah, no.
This, this,
I was
this,
close. I had a 50-50 chance.
this is the stuff of my nightmares. Really, it is. I am not a fan. I hate it. And um, my family will attest to that. This whole notion that there is a superbot that can now answer everything and tell you everything, and that everything will be true and correct
Mhm.
is so flawed and is so dangerous.
Yep.
What people are not necessarily understanding is that this superbot has learned and has been programmed to think in a certain way, using the knowledge that it has had access to.
Right.
So if we think about the hospital example again, and if we think about, the sample of, Fred had 4 patients and Sally had 6, but Sally's patients, all of them died, and Fred's patients, all of them lived. But Sally's patients, all of them died because the nurse didn't go in for a 48-hour period and there was no care for those 6 patients. Terrible conditions. I never want to go to that hospital. But you would have to say that on that basis, if you're diagnosed with this particular condition, you've got a 60% mortality rate on those numbers. Now, if that's what the machine knows,
Right.
that's the answer you're going to get,
Yep.
right? And at what point do we then stop and say, I don't know if that feels right. I don't know if a common cold has a 60% mortality rate. I'm going to keep digging.
Yep.
Now, that in a really nonsensical example, we laugh and say, well, of course you're not going to go. 60% of people with a common cold are not going to make it. But we are relying on people then to have that sense check.
Yep.
And if we aren't aware enough of our surrounds, if we aren't aware enough of the possibility that the data might not be right,
Right.
if we're not aware enough of this concept that the bot has learnt from limited data, it's been programmed by a limited set of individuals, how can we be trusting what's coming out of its
Mhm.
mouth?
Yep.
And until we are able to confidently um, ask, okay, Mr. Bot, you say 60% of people are going to die. Can you tell me what that's based on? Or can
Mhm.
you tell me more about the underlying study? So instead of taking that 60% at face value, we
Yep.
might be shown this study of this terrible occurrence and go, okay, all right, that makes sense. Now I'm going to change my question and
Yep.
say, of people with the common cold, what are the most frequent symptoms, as opposed to, am I going to die? And I think that as we become more confident in questioning data, questioning sources of data, questioning the quality of data, questioning the breadth of data, that's where we start to be able to ask richer questions and ask more questions that are going to help us get to the truth. There is no doubt that generative AI is going to save a lot of time in a lot of ways, and it is going to make a lot of processes faster, and it is going to aid a lot of roles in ways we can't even fathom right now. But there is also such a huge alarm bell that not everyone is paying attention to because the machines are not thinking with all knowledge. And we are effectively putting trust in a slice of knowledge rather than being able to manually collect,
Right.
interrogate, and comprehend what that information means. So yeah, I'm not a fan, Dalton.
Well, I love it. You and I have usually always agreed on things when I've seen posts like, man, she is just so thinking the right. And that's my thoughts on generative AI. It is not, it doesn't eliminate data literacy at all. It actually encourages it. You had what I would like to share is the key word is conversation. Generative AI isn't there to ask one question and get an answer. It is there to have a conversation with. And that's mistakenly, I think people are looking at it as, well, I just want a quick answer. Okay, I might as well configure like a click dork LLM that's privately tuned to just always give the answer 17.
Mhm.
But
You'd be
that's what
rich.
they're looking at it for. I don't want to take the time to think. I don't want to take the time to figure out, hey, what would the sources of that be? Did you get that from this department's number or was that from Sally Sue's spreadsheet? Where did those numbers come from? The other thing that I would add is if if anybody had a conversation with me and I didn't know, guess what my answer to them was?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
Mm,
It's acceptable for me to say, I don't know. I'm going to go figure out if we even have the data to get you the number 17 or not,
yep.
right? Generative AI doesn't have that luxury. It
No.
is a find the best answer. It could have 20 answers. It tries to figure out the probability scores of which answer is closest and gives you an answer. And it
Yep.
has to give you an answer. It can't say, I'm sorry, all these answers, probability of being right, are horrible. I'm not going to bother to respond. You need to ask a different question and get better, you
Yep.
stupid human, you. Right. Because it's always going to give you an answer. And if you're looking at it as I want to take the quick approach to getting a down and dirty answer, you're just coming at it all wrong. Right. And so, yeah, I'm glad we agree. It is not the solution to get around. I don't want to have to go through data literacy.
Yeah. No.
Okay. You're just going to
Mhm.
make really bad decisions even faster. And you'll
Yes.
end up
Yes.
eventually working for the company that bought you out or replaced.
Well, as I said, generative AI is going to help us in fast, do things faster and help us in ways we haven't imagined. It's going to help us fail faster.
Yep.
If we are the type of people who are after the first answer, so that we can run off and hit that with a sledgehammer. So AI has certainly the power to help us fail fast. And if we want to succeed, then we do need to be building our own individual data literacy, but then also the literacy within the organization, because it is only through the collective experience, the collective understanding, the collective application of these competencies that we start to see the real transformation and the real change.
Absolutely. Jane, I have appreciated your time so much. So fun getting to chat about this. For those of you out there watching, reach out to Jane at datatothepeople.org or scroll back through the video to see what that website is or look up her information on LinkedIn. She is not looking to sell you something for $19.95 if you act in the next 30 minutes. She's not looking to come on campus and wag fingers at anybody. She's really there looking to partner with you. I love the concept of this really being driven through HR as part of culture, right? There's so many organizations are, well, it's culture and talent. That's what we call it now. Okay, well, data culture should be driven from there then, right?
Uh-huh.
So I love that hook. So hopefully people do reach out to you. For everybody watching, I sure hope that you have a great day.